September 11th is actually my mom's birthday, and I was in my first hour classroom. And when I had gotten the call that my mom was in the office waiting for me, I thought, oh, it's her birthday. She's taking me out to breakfast, or we're doing something. I didn't think anything of it. And as I walked into the office, I remember seeing my mom crying. She was in hysterics because our family lives in New York City. And as we were in the office, we were watching CNN, and the second plane had hit the Trade Center. And I will always remember that moment, the look on my mom's face, the gasp, the not knowing what to say, the looking at me. She just looked at me, and she didn't even know how to explain what was happening. She didn't know what to do. And we went home. I remember my grandparents were at my house, and my mom was still very upset, and they were trying to explain to me what had happened, what all of this meant. I mean, I got that planes had hit the building, but I didn't know. I didn't know the implications of the entire situation. And my dad was working, he was in the Renaissance Center at the time. I don't know that he was working there, he was probably in a meeting there. And they were under lockdown. So that made everything so much more stressful for my family since he was there. We couldn't contact our family in New York. It was just one massive day of confusion. I remember talking to one of my cousins. It was her first week of high school. She went to Stuyvesant High School, which is directly across from the business district by the World Trade Centers. And she described the pandemonium as something that I could never understand. I mean, just people flooding the streets from the school. They just left, and subways weren't running, and there were people all over the place, and no one knew where to go. And we kept trying to contact family members, and I remember we did get in contact with some of them, but others we had no way to contact them because phone lines were down, and my mom would get so upset because it would send the same exact message, and my grandma was getting so upset because it would just say, due to the events, the phone lines are down, whatever. It was some small talk response that you just didn't want to hear for 2 to 3 days in a row. Friday or Monday, I would assume. Yeah, my dad stayed home with us. My mom didn't stay home, but I don't know, my parents just wanted to keep us home. They kept trying to explain, my mom and dad kept trying to explain to us what had happened and what it meant, and that everything was okay with our family and everything would be fine. But I have three younger siblings. I mean, one's 2 years younger, 4 years younger, and 8 years younger. So there had to be so many different ways to explain it to each of us. Obviously, my little sister didn't get the explanation we did since she was so young, but they still had to try and explain to each of us what had happened. I think that process became more tumultuous as the next week began, as we were back in school, because my brother Nick, he's the one directly younger than me. Everyone would be coming home with such odd information. You know how fourth, fifth graders talk. They're not getting the same message that everyone else is getting, and they intercept it differently. So to have to sit down and to explain to him what I thought I knew, whether it was correct or not, I don't know. It was what I thought I knew at the time. It was difficult. It was difficult because I didn't fully understand what was going on, but I still felt like I had to talk to him. And my friends too, because they sat in the classrooms at my junior high school, and the TVs were not allowed to be on for that entire week. No one talked about it. It was just completely swept under the rug, which was totally irresponsible in my opinion. I don't think it was right at all. I thought there should be discussion about it since school is where you learn, and that would have been the correct venue to approach something like that. It was bizarre. I got a lot of questions, a lot of where were you? Why? I mean, my friends knew that I have a lot of family that live in New York, but they didn't under they didn't understand how it impacted me. They didn't understand how it impacted my family. And for some reason they thought I had this vault of wisdom that they didn't have since I was gone for 3 days. They thought I had somehow been more involved than they were, when really I was just home as a precaution. And I mean, I did watch the news, but there were some things my parents didn't want me to see. When they were showing live footage, for example, on CNN of people falling out of buildings, my parents didn't want me to see that. You know, they would make sure that some of the information was viewed prior. I mean, when there's these 24-hour news stations, obviously there's going to be repetitive information. So they let me watch it, but they tried to censor some of what I saw. It definitely does bring back the memories. I know it's very hard for my mom still. She does not like celebrating her birthday anymore, not because she's getting older, but because of that reason. It's very difficult for her to think about every year. But at the same time, I think without September 11th being as terrible as it was, our family wouldn't be as close as it is now. I mean, I speak to all of my relatives in New York much more often than I probably ever would have. That event, it brought us together. You know, it gave us an evident reason. It gave us some sort of greater reason to extend to them and make sure we kept in constant contact. They came here. It was probably not more than a few months after. But my family in New York usually comes to Michigan more than we go there, just because there's so many of us in Michigan now, and going out there's way more expensive than them coming here. And not to mention the housing situation in New York City. They may have a house, but that doesn't mean we can all fit in it. No, I don't notice a change in the atmosphere. I flew out of JFK to go to Spain 2 years ago, and it was seriously, it was easier than flying out of Detroit. It was a smooth process. I mean, there's people obviously remember what happened, but I don't think I think everyone just continued to live as they were. I mean, it's obviously important to remember it as a historical day, but it's even more important to remember that things like this you can't anticipate. You know, it's not something that you go weeks and months thinking, oh, this is going to happen or this isn't going to happen. It just happens. So be prepared, be ready. You have to evaluate how you would react to something like that. Not necessarily prepare yourself, but make sure you're in the right mindset, make sure you're ready to deal with something should it happen.